Welcome. If you've ever heard of the terrifying prophecy about the 3 days of darkness, you might already know that it's often discussed in apocalyptic circles as a sign of the end times. But, what if I told you that there's something far more unsettling, something tied directly to both the Bible and the present day? Dr. Taylor Marshall, in one of her recent talks, reveals a prophecy that involves not just darkness, but the return of two great figures from Christian history, Peter and Paul. According to her, they will see an apparition and somehow be involved in appointing a new pope. What does this have to do with the 3 days of darkness? And what if I told you that this concept is not just a vague rumor but something that appears in both the Old and New Testaments of the Bible? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you might see the 3 days of darkness in an entirely new light. To begin understanding the significance of the 3 days of darkness, we need to approach it from a theological perspective. The book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse, is key to this understanding. Unfortunately, many Catholics misinterpret this book, often seeing it as a series of disconnected events. But in reality, the book of Revelation should be seen as a single, unfolding revelation. The term revelation comes from the Latin word apocalypsis, which means to reveal or to pull back the curtain. In Revelation 16:10, we read about the fifth angel pouring out a vial of judgment upon the throne of the beast, which causes a great darkness to descend. The text tells us, the kingdom of the beast was engulfed in darkness when the fifth angel spilled his bowl on its throne, and the people suffer tremendous pain as their tongues burn with agony. This passage is significant because it indicates that darkness will descend as a form of punishment, specifically upon the beast's kingdom. The beast is a symbolic figure, often interpreted as a representation of the Antichrist, and his throne represents his power, authority, and influence. This connection to darkness is important. In the Bible, darkness is not just a physical absence of light, it is often symbolic of spiritual corruption, evil, and judgment. Just as the kingdom of the beast is shrouded in darkness, those who follow the beast, or Satan, will be enveloped in this same judgment. It's important to note, however, that the specific mention of 3 days of darkness doesn't appear in the book of Revelation itself. While the 3 days of darkness are part of private revelations in Catholic tradition, especially in the context of the end times, the Bible speaks more generally about darkness as a sign of divine punishment. The phrase "he poured out his vial on the seat of the beast" is crucial here because it symbolizes God's judgment upon the power structures that are aligned with evil. In this context, the seat represents authority, which is significant both in the Old and New Testaments. For instance, the Pope sits on the chair of St. Peter, and Christ himself sits at the right hand of God the Father. These seats of power are symbols of spiritual authority. Now, let's dive deeper into the meaning of the vial or bowl of judgment. The angel's action of pouring the vial onto the beast's throne signifies a divine retribution. When this happens, the beast's power is cast into darkness, showing that God's judgment has overtaken the forces of evil. This imagery draws a parallel to other biblical events, specifically to the story of the 10 plagues in Egypt, which we find in the Old Testament. In the book of Exodus, the Israelites were held captive in Egypt, enslaved by Pharaoh, a tyrant who refused to let them go. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, much like the heart of the Antichrist in Christian eschatology. He represents evil and idolatry, two forces that oppose God. Just as the Antichrist seeks to destroy God's people, Pharaoh sought to maintain his oppressive rule over the Israelites. In the story of the Exodus, Moses, guided by God, is called to lead the Israelites out of slavery. Through a series of plagues, God shows his power and judgment over Egypt. Among these plagues, one stands out, the 9th plague, the 3 days of darkness. In Exodus 10:22, we read that Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and a terrifying darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. This darkness was so thick that the people could not see one another or even move. It was a sign of God's judgment on Egypt for its idolatry, its oppression of God's people, and its rebellion against God's will. This event, the 3 days of darkness, is where the idea begins to take shape. It serves as a powerful image of divine wrath and a warning for those who persist in sin. Now, while the 3 days of darkness in the Old Testament were a judgment specifically against Egypt, the concept of darkness is used in Revelation to describe a judgment that will fall upon the wicked in the end times. But instead of just 3 days, Revelation focuses on the broader idea of spiritual darkness and torment as a result of divine retribution. It's important to note that although the New Testament doesn't mention 3 days of darkness specifically, it does describe a period of darkness when Christ is crucified, 3 hours of darkness, from noon to 3 p.m., when the sun failed to shine. This event is seen as a symbolic moment, representing the weight of sin and the separation from God that Christ bore on the cross. In connecting the dots between the Old Testament plagues and the darkness described in Revelation, we see a repeating theme: darkness as a form of judgment, a sign of God's anger against evil. In the context of Dr. Taylor Marshall's prophecy, this idea takes on new meaning. If, as she suggests, the 3 days of darkness are part of a larger eschatological event, then it is not just a random occurrence but a divine judgment that marks the end of an era, the end of the reign of the beast, and the moment when God reasserts his authority over the world. As we continue to explore these prophecies, it's clear that the theme of darkness, both literal and spiritual, plays a critical role in understanding the end times. The 3 days of darkness, as prophesied by many Catholic saints and mystics throughout history, are seen as a time of purification, where the forces of evil will be vanquished, and the faithful will be protected. Whether this prophecy is fulfilled literally or symbolically, it serves as a reminder of the power of divine judgment and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. The fact that these incidents are analogies that lead to Christ should not be overlooked. Jesus completed the Old Testament. On Good Friday, for example, Jesus went through his passion, which included being scourged and hanging on a cross. The world was enveloped in darkness from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, according to Matthew's account. We can see that the death of the firstborn took place after the 3 days of darkness. Whose children are the firstborn? Jesus Christ, our Lord, was the firstborn of God. This is a meaningful fulfillment. However, here is where things start to become very interesting. If certain private revelations, like those of Our Lady of La Leche, are confirmed, it means that the Church will undergo a time of obscurity, which may already be occurring, and undergo a last passion, according to Dr. Taylor Marshall. The Church will experience perplexity while completely conforming to her husband, Jesus Christ. The apostles, who are the bishops, will run away, with the exception of St. John the beloved apostle, just as Peter rejected Jesus 3 times. The Church will experience a betrayal inside its deepest trust, just as Judas did. But we are certain that Our Lady will remain till the very end. This similarity within the Church has been acknowledged by several holy figures. The 3 days of darkness during the Passion of Christ will purify the Church, just as the 3 days of darkness during Moses' time and the 3 hours of darkness at Christ's crucifixion did. The idea of the 3 days of darkness is a contentious one, especially when it comes to Padre Pio. Although Padre Pio is said to have taught about this occurrence, there is no proof to back up this claim. Padre Pio may have personally believed in it, but there is no evidence that he taught about it. Furthermore, a certified declaration from the Capuchin Franciscans confirms that Padre Pio never taught such doctrines. The idea that Padre Pio preached about the 3 days of darkness or that the Book of Revelation mentions it should therefore not be propagated. So, from whence did this idea come? The surprising part comes next. The origin of it may be found in the Italian lady Anna Maria Taigi, who was born in 1769 and passed away in 1873. She had 7 children, 3 of whom passed away in infancy, and she identified as a secular Trinitarian. Following a significant conversion later in life, she started to receive messages from Jesus Christ, apparitions, and visitations. She was beatified by Pope Benedict XV in 1920. A priest is tasked with compiling all of the saint's works and having theologians and academics examine them to make sure nothing erroneous is found before the saint is beatified. In the instance of Tai's secret disclosures, the 3 days of darkness are described in great detail. Blessed Anna Maria Taigi prophesied a major chastisement for the world's grave sins in the future. She predicted 2 penalties from God. One would include evils that start on earth, such as uprisings and wars. Heaven would provide the other penalty. A 3-day, 3-night period of extreme darkness would engulf the whole planet. Nothing would be seen during this darkness, and the air would be teeming with illness, which would mostly harm the adversaries of religion. There would be no light from man-made illumination, just from blessed wax candles. Curiosity would cause anybody to open their windows or leave their house and die right away. It is suggested that over these 3 days, people remain at home, recite the rosary, and beg God for forgiveness. With the exception of a select few who will be evangelized by God, all of the Church's adversaries, known and unknown, will die amid this global gloom. Demons will permeate the air and take on a variety of frightful appearances. The Most Holy Sacrament, the Cross, and Our Lady are represented by the 3 days of darkness, which will take place on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. 3 days less 1 night will be the duration. On September 20, 1882, Our Lady declared that hell would be let loose and the earth would be enveloped in darkness. The terror of thunder and lightning would kill everyone who did not believe in her power. Since gazing upon the earth's awful hue during the punishment would instantly result in death, windows should not be opened during these dreadful 3 days of darkness. It will divide the earth and set the heavens on flames. Since no other light will be available during this darkness, blessed candles should be burned everywhere. It became clear on December 8, 1882, that nobody outside of a shelter would live. Fear will be rampant, and the earth will tremble. But the devout will have their prayers answered, and no one will die. To propagate the gospel, they will be required. In this terrible darkness, the only light will come from consecrated wax candles. It will just take one candle to last the whole night of torment. But these lamps won't light up the houses of the wicked and blasphemers. The Virgin Mary says there will be another earthquake during these times of grief. It will still be important even if it won't be as powerful as the others. Everything will tremble, with the exception of the furniture that has the blessed candle burning on it. During this time of gloom, people should congregate around the crucifix and the holy image to fend against fear. Evildoers and demons will assume hideous shapes. Thunder and lightning will be present as blood-red clouds travel across the sky. The sea will rise and its thundering waves will sweep over the continent as the earth is shaken. It is recommended to preserve goods that bring blessings from heaven, such as metals, blessed candles, and other items. These items will ward off Satan's pleadings and quiet the raging torrent of Luciferian sounds. To allay dread, people should assemble around the crucifix and the sacred image, which would cause many fatalities these days. During these 3 days, those who worship, invoke, and maintain the picture of the Virgin Mary in their houses will be protected. They will protect their animals from famine. Don't leave any doors open. In the absence of food, the ravenous animals will be content. The Lord promises to return shortly in all the glory of his justice. He'll topple the planet and pelt sinful souls with thunder. No matter how big or little their crosses are, his dedicated followers will bear his cross even in the middle of the fear. We know that darkness has existed in the past, including at the time of Moses and during the 3 hours that Jesus Christ was crucified, at which point he delivered us from our sins. It seems logical to assume that the book of Revelation's prophecy of 3 days of darkness during the end times may come to pass. Furthermore, Revelation 16:10's statement that they gnawed their tongues for pain implies that the wicked will suffer during this time of darkness because they glorify Satan and spread demonic ideas with their tongues, understanding that their punishment of darkness is a result of their defiance of God. With all of these things taken into account, darkness will probably win out once again in the near future. Therefore, Luke 13:3 emphasizes that only those who turn from their sins will be protected from what is ahead. I say to you, but unless you do penance, you shall all likewise perish. So, friends, would you be ready if the 3 days of darkness were to descend on us at this very moment? If you're not ready, I highly suggest that you begin preparing right now since the time could be closer than you think.